G'day champions. Today we've got a Silverface twin reverb amp reissue. This has been recently serviced by people who, without naming names, are some of the good guys. We can trust them, and it's stopped working. So the owner suspected it had a blown fuse. The mains fuse is not blown, but there's no light. So when there's you flick the switch and nothing happens, everyone just assumes it's the mains fuse. But quickly I could use the mains power meter to establish if any current is being drawn, and if there is, then we suspect the heater circuit has an issue. So let's dig in and have a wee boo. Alright, so we've got it plugged in, we've got the power meter in circuit, and I'm just going to flick it on but leave it in standby so we don't need to plug in a speaker. We can see as soon as we flick the power switch, 22 watts is being drawn. So I suspect the heater circuit. So we've got it flipped over this way. I've just pulled the screws out of the doghouse cover and just inspecting visually. No shmoo coming out the end of the caps yet. It's only a matter of time, being our favourite brand of capacitor. But I'll check those resistors, check that they're within tolerance, and we'll check the ripple once we get this thing sorted out and see if the caps need replacing. I'll give the owner an option to replace them anyway, knowing how reliable they are not. But in the meantime, let's keep looking for the primary fault. So all the getters look intact on the 6L6s. This is a new set put in by the previous service person. And there's my reflection of my camera. Anyway. So all the preamp valves look okay. They're all JJs. Probably all been replaced. There is one electro harmonics there. But not sure if they're original or not. I don't think they ever put JJs in originally, but considering there is a full set, maybe they did. Don't know. I'd have to look at the previous repair ticket, and I do not have that. But anyway, they're all fine. So that wouldn't cause the fault anyway, because preamp valves failing doesn't have the ability to draw enough current to cause major issues elsewhere. Just weird signal issues. But yeah, we're all good. Moving on. Now flipped it over and had a quick look. Obviously we'll look at the caps first. No major leakage there. No burn marks or anything anywhere real severe, except as soon as I had a look down there, same old problem. Trying to use a heater on the a fuse on the heaters, and you can see there's even glob of solder down there. I don't know how that came to be, but there is an issue here, likely from the quick connect. That one looks burnt. That one looks okay, but then the fuse holder has issues, so I'd say we've got no continuity in the heater circuit. That is consistent with drawing a little bit of current, but having no pilot light and no significant current when you flick it out of standby. So we're in luck with this one, since it is a reissue and they've chosen to wire the heaters for every valve by hand. What we can do is ignore that fuse, take it out of circuit. We'll just pull those burnt quick connects off, and we'll just hardwire them straight to those black and white wires there, and then problem solved, hunky-dory, legal for sale everywhere except Europe. And after we've done that, we'll just go back to square one and treat this thing as a new job coming in, and we'll assess if there's any other secondary issues. When I say primary, secondary, I'm not talking about the transformer. I'm talking about the issue that it came in for, which was no power, and then, well, to the perception of the customer, no power, but there was still a little bit of power, just not in the right place. Then we'll go over the thing and just see if there's any secondary issues, weird noises, anything playing up, scratchy pots, faulty jacks, you know, all the other stuff that never gets mentioned when the lights go out. Well, as soon as I disconnected these from the board, they pretty much just crumbled in my hand. The heat has made the plastic all brittle. and the wire has begun to oxidize and looks a dull grey, so we'll cut them off and probably take off another quarter to, you know, half an inch before restripping and finding some decent wire that's not all gross from the heat generated by the resistance of these quick connects, which were never rated for the current expected of them. But everyone keeps using them anyway and hoping for the best, because if it passes the warranty, job done. And once again, it's not the actual fuse that fails, it's the connections to the fuse and the connections to the board, because they mounted the fuse to the board, which was the only reason that any heater voltage was on the board. They could have used either an inline fuse or another fuse mounted somewhere else, hardwired, and it wouldn't have been an issue. But I think it's the main reason they do this on internationally exported amps is just to comply by local regulations regarding every secondary being fused. I don't believe that's a regulation in, well, can't be in the States. I don't know how Mesa Boogies get into Europe, because they don't fuse anything on the secondaries. Don't know, maybe they just pay the right people off. Joking. I'm not accusing them of... Oh, yes I am, who cares, whatever, no one's watching. Now you can see here this wiring isn't beautiful, but it's a bit, sort of got a bit of a shine to it. Whereas I've taken off about half an inch and it's still a dull grey, sort of oxidized look to where it was connected to those quick connect, spade connectors, whatever you want to call them. So we'll get my solder with a slightly angry flux, the stuff that tends to eat through that stuff, and we'll see if that'll bite through and give us a nice shiny tinned surface so we can splice these and then heat shrink them like you should. So this is my mildly annoyed solder, my angry solder I call it. The flux is slightly more aggressive and it tends to break through corrosion a little bit more effectively than my usual stuff, which is Loctite 362 6040 again. Both of these are 0.7mm. I find they're the most effective for working on sort of chunky valve amp stuff, and then I'll use like 0.5 or 0.3, whatever it is, to work on some of the finer surface mount or, you know, just smaller circuit board stuff. Well, success. The solder took to those gross wires and now they're nice and tinned. Same with the other ones. So it worked out rather well. Now we'll just create a little J-hook in there, splice them together, and we won't forget to put the heat shrink on this time, okay? Alright, there are our two splices. I don't go overboard with all the NASA splice bullshit that the boutique guys go on about. At the end of the day, the weak spot's the hook. And often those guys will go on about their military spot, the splicing and all that bullshit, and then every other connection in the amp's just tack soldered, so it's good enough, champs. And there it is, heat shrunk and cable tied back into the rest of the loom as it was before. And we just ignore those two connectors down there. They don't go to anything else on the board other than either end of that heater and to the output of the well, where those black and white wires were feeding to the rest of the amp. Yeah, they're just little nubs. Alrighty, we've got a ready to rock again. Just watch the current this time. We were getting about 22 watts before. We'll just turn the power on, not the standby. And now she's up to like settling down after the inrush. It's more like at around 65. Alright, so we'll plug a guitar in, see how she sounds, and then go through and just check the bias and everything as usual. And check for any secondary faults after that. Alright legends, so turn it on, drawing about 155 watts, which puts each valve at a bit over 70% on average. It's a little bit hot for my liking, but it's, you know, it's not stupid hot, so I'll tone that back a little bit maybe. I'll give the customer an option to do a few little extra bits and pieces that might help him out in the long run. like new axial caps, that kind of thing. But essentially, everything's working as it should be, and a little bit of scratchiness in the pots, that kind of thing. And the jacks are getting a little bit corroded, so that will probably have some crackly effects if we. It's not too bad. Probably just a bit of dust. It looks like corrosion. But yeah, essentially everything's working. So this one I've got a little shorting jack. Focus. Hello. That's just tip to sleeve. It's essentially a pole of metal because they're shorted out. This has got a tip ring sleeve, so I believe, well, I'm not sure which one's which, but one of them grounds the reverb return, the other one basically enables the tremolo. So you need a jack plugged in for the tremolo to go. It's not one of the ones where you plug the jack in and the tremolo stops. So we'll plug this little thing in. That'll kill the reverb. The tank's not plugged in at the moment anyway, so when I turn up the reverb, it's just more hiss. But it'll allow us to check that the tremolo is working, so let's do that. So there we go, no major issues on this one, just the dodgy connects to the heater, and everything seems to be working more or less as it should. So I'll probably leave it here for this one. Pretty straightforward, boring one for once. They don't come along often around here. Someone else gets all those easy jobs. And see you on the next one, champions. So yeah, take it easy, eh?